Well, joining me now on Talking Pints is a familiar face to those that watch the other news channels because he appears regularly on all the other channels. Alex Deane, you're always there, aren't you, on paper reviews and commentary, but you're here at GBNews Talking Pints, pouring your own beer.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So I hope it's more fun coming to GB News than it is doing the others.
It's a lot of fun. I don't get to do this on air normally.
No. But you do a lot of paper reviews, and you do comment a lot, particularly on the Conservative side of politics. Cheers.
Your health.
And I guess that's a long time ago, but you were, for a period of time, Chief of Staff to David Cameron.
In opposition, not in government.
In opposition, and I understand that, I know that, but you're one of those people that's been very close to David Cameron. And, of course, you know, he became leader of the Tory party in extraordinary circumstances. David Davis was odds-on favourite. The bookmakers stopped taking money. You know, shiny David Cameron appeared, became the leader, became the Prime Minister, led us into the Brexit referendum where you opposed his position and you were a very strong Brexiteer.
Yeah.
What was he like?
What you see is what you get. Perfectly decent stick, instinctive Conservative.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think he wouldn't, say he was the most kind of deep-rooted of ideological people, but his kind of instincts were small-c Conservative. And I thought he did this country a great service, perhaps not intentionally, but a great service in giving us the referendum.
He didn't want to do that.
No, I'll always be grateful to him for it, though.
He didn't want to do it. He was forced into it, wasn't he?
Well, one could argue that there were lots of people that wouldn't have done it. And I think the majority... I think David Davis would, by the way, but I think a number of other people who were around the leadership at that time would not have gone so far as to give us a referendum. And for that, even if you might think it was ill-judged on his part, given the perspective that he... Bear in mind, the government campaigned to remain. Conservative Party was neutral, but the government campaigned to remain. So from his perspective, you might think it didn't come off as they wished. But I'm still grateful for that biggest exercise in democracy we ever had. So, you know, all in all, not a bad result.
Yeah, as I say, I think it's the last thing he wanted to do. I don't think he had much choice. I think the Europe issue had become so strong in the minds of so many Conservative supporters and donors and members of Parliament, they were leeching support to UKIP at what he felt was a dramatic phase. But you're right, in the end, he did give it to us.
But it's a bit weird that it's this conversation this way around, because I feel like I should be interviewing you. The biggest reason that he had to do it was you.
Yeah, I think that's right. No, that's right. I mean, look, we got there, we won the referendum, we had years of agony afterwards, but FTI Consulting is your company, you're involved in all sorts of...
Speaking in a personal capacity, he said, is drinking on air.
Yeah, well, fine, but you're involved with all sorts of commercial issues, political issues. But, Alex, you're a lifelong Conservative.
Yes.
And we've been debating tonight and asking the public the question. You know, Boris Johnson has now turned the Conservative Party into the Green Party. He has become the global high priest of carbon reduction, and he appears to be very happy for consumers to continue to pay very high prices for things, because he believes unless we do it that way, that the world's all going to come to an end. And this, as leader of a country that only produces 1% of global CO2.
I don't think it's as much as that, but...
Well, OK.
Let's say that you're right in that extreme view that it's 1%. Even if we close down UK PLC, the increase in what we see from our friends in China would more than swallow it up. I thought it was a very neat parallel that the Chinese are bringing on in gigawatt power this year the equivalent of the entirety of European gigawatt output from power stations.
Just astonishing.
So what we do in this country, the hair shirt attitude, take your boiler out, get a new car. The idea that we should be beating up people for not quite being green enough, when actually the world's biggest polluters are exempt from the Paris Accords. For me, that's for the birds. And whatever.
But here's the point. It's your party that's doing this. This is a Conservative party that is doing this. It's a Conservative party that has taken all sorts of government powers under coronavirus and keeps wanting to extend and extend and extend the dates through which they can use those powers. It's a Conservative party that is tying itself to massive additional spending in a National Health Service that many would argue, yes, we want it, but we want it reformed.
Yeah.
It's a Conservative Party that has done nothing for small business. I mean, literally nothing for small business. 6 million people out there running their own businesses, acting as sole traders. There's been no supply-side reform since Brexit. I mean, and this is what people are asking, and not just me. I promise you, out there in the country, people are saying, what is happening to the Conservatives?
So let me try and take those one by one. First of all, I agree that there should be an aggressive tax-cutting agenda, and that's at the heart of what both you and I believe. And I do think, and you can say it's an intangible or a what-if, so we'll never know, but I think if we hadn't gone through this coronavirus period with an 80-seat majority, we would be seeing vociferous demands on my side of the Conservative Party for tax cuts. Right? Now, no one can deny that coronavirus has changed the world, changed the agenda in that environment, but, you know, there is a low-tax agenda in the Conservative Party, and believe me, it's alive and well. So on the tax point, and I think that point we can definitely make progress on as we come out of the pandemic. Small businesses, I completely agree. When you take big government action, inevitably the people who are most proximate to what government does are the largest businesses. This is one of the reasons that the European Union has been propped up so long, right? The left-wing case for Brexit might not be your or my perspective, but God bless them, they were in the trenches. The left-wing perspective for Brexit was that the EU was a corporatist stitch-up done in the interest of big businesses and big banks. You know what?
Well, they weren't wrong.
Not completely wrong.
So do you know, you won't be... I had a look yesterday. At Eurostar trains to Brussels. Now, you and I met many times on Eurostar.
Had a few drinks.
And we may have done. And I looked. Do you know, there are now only 3 Eurostar trains a day to Brussels.
Yeah, it's pandemic only.
Because, no. It's because the lobby isn't going to Brussels anymore. Yeah. The lobby isn't going to Brussels. So that's where...
I see.
Yeah, so thousands of people...
The great jamboree isn't on the train.
Yeah, all looking for big legislative changes. But I'm asking you about it. What I'm really asking you is this, rather than going through the whole list. Yeah. Is this still a Conservative Party?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I wanted to get to the other ones you were raising.
Go on, if you wish to.
Yeah, no, because for me it's important that the direction of travel for the Conservative Party remains one that believes in freedom for the individual and directed towards a free market in which people can make their own choices in a lowest tax possible environment. In fact, that's my only complaint about things like the Laffer curve, which people on our side of politics often cite, is that it implies that the right thing to do is to get it just up towards the maximum take before you tip over into the tax rate being too high. That's for the birds, for me. You should tax as low as possible while still being able to run a functioning state. That's the point for me.
But this government are putting taxes up.
Yeah, but so I have to say we've had a pandemic in which every government faces that kind of crisis.
I tell you what, if I give them a pass on that one, which I don't actually, but if I do. But
we should let me keep going then.
But what else? What else are they going to do that's Conservative?
Well, I think that... So we talked about tax cuts, and I believe we're going to get back to that agenda. I secondly think that the free schools...
We're not there now.
The free schools and academy agenda in education is one that this government is pretty committed to. I mean, bear in mind, I hold no brief to talk for them, but that's...
I know that.
Yeah, but I think that is at the core of the belief in the Conservative Party about education. I don't think that this is a government that is like its Labour predecessors. The point about Gordon Brown was that he would spend money on the NHS, not for a result.
I don't care about Gordon Brown.
I'm trying to explain the differential in mindset, because that's what you were asking about. What's Conservative? Yeah. Brown spent money on the NHS, not for a result, but to be able to say he'd spent money on the NHS. This government's going to spend money on the NHS because we've got a backlog of 2 years of operations not performed, people not treated, because we turned our NHS into a COVID healthcare system. Now, you can say we could have done it better. Nevertheless, there is a real need to spend money in the NHS for this defined purpose and for this defined time.
Yeah.
And unlike most governments, they've been honest to say, this is why we're taxing you and this is what it's for. Name me one other thing that government does that for, apart from the bloody BBC. The only ring-fence tax that we face, the only hypothecated tax that we have.
So should we scrap the licence fee?
Absolutely. Well, no, we shouldn't just scrap the licence fee, we should scrap the BBC. The BBC is no longer fit for purpose.
Dominic Cummings, for all his faults, and they're many, was the one radical thinker on issues like this that was there within Number 10. He's gone. Boris Johnson would never scrap the BBC, would he?
I don't know. I did a lot of media events with John Whittingdale, who's also just left government, who would always say that Alex Deane gives him something to be to the left of. Because he would say, you know, I want to radically reform the BBC, and I would say it's time to get rid of the BBC. And I do worry that some of that, that dynamism that was in that department may have been lost in translation. Very often in transition, things matter about individuals. And what happens with Channel 4 is tied up with that as well, because they were halfway through that when they did the reshuffle. But if you put the personalities to one side, I do think this is a government that is more sceptical about what happens with the BBC than any government in my lifetime. Now, we can always wish for what happened over our shoulder. I wouldn't have renewed their charter last time, but we are where we are. And I think that this is a government that's going to hold their feet to the fire
Alex,
more strongly than anyone else.
You're giving this government the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people out there getting very sceptical. But on a slightly lighter note, I think, your new book is out. We must talk about this. Lessons from History, Hidden Heroes and Villains of the Past, and what we can learn from them. And this is about public figures, political figures, but there's one particular story that stood out that I want you to tell, because it's remarkable. And it's about Sir Walter Bromley Davenport. So share that little story with us.
First of all, you're very kind, and I show how much of an amateur I am not to have even brought a copy to prop up and put to the camera. Walter Bromley Davenport was a long-term backbench MP, very briefly made it into the Whip's office. And he was a man after our own hearts in lots of ways. He'd done his time in the military, and we respect all who've done their service. And he would castigate younger MPs and say, you junior officers, no discipline. He would forever shout at Labour MPs saying, get your hands out of your pockets. But in his brief and relatively inglorious time as a whip, Walter Bromley Davenport espied in the distance someone as the clock neared 10 o'clock in the last vote, well before family-friendly hours. But saw someone fleeing the Palace of Westminster, and he bellowed the name of his MP, and the blighter didn't even turn around. He thought, you sod. Chased him down the corridors of Westminster and gave him a hearty Bromley Davenport boot up the bum. And only when said MP fell down the stairs did it turn out that it wasn't the MP, it was the Belgian ambassador. They don't make them like they used to.
That's proper whipping. And we know, of course, about the villains in politics. Lots of villains in politics. MPs that have been to prison and all sorts of things. But for you, having written this book, having spent your whole life in politics and current affairs and research for this book, who do you see as the heroes?
The heroes for me are people who do the right thing, knowing that it's going to cost them personally, knowing it might even stymie their entire lives, but do it anyway. And there's umpteen examples in the book of people who did that during the Holocaust, whether they were in Germany, in occupied Poland, in neutral countries like Portugal that were fearful of their neutrality and seeking to pacify the Axis powers, or those who sought in their small ways to try to do the right thing, even as everything around them was raining fire. And those stories, I think, are remarkable. I also told the story of Stanislav Petrov, who was in the bunker in the Soviet Union when the warning came that the Americans were launching a nuclear war against them. And he just thought it was wrong. And he held out. And he said, I don't believe it. And he single-handedly stopped this world disappearing into nuclear war. Now, he was not thanked by the Soviet Union. In fact, he was demoted, moved sideways into mental breakdown and into obscurity. But my goodness, we would probably not be sitting here today.
I like that.
Not for him.
I like that. It's a good story. Alex, thank you for joining us. Well, that was Alex Deane, and after his all-out launched assault on the very existence of the BBC, you may not be seeing much more of him doing paper reviews there.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.